Okay, so would you like to introduce yourself as well as tell us how long you've been in Champaign County?
Yes, my name is Jim Sinclair, and I've lived in Champaign County since 1968, quite a few years. And I'm retired from the University of Illinois. I was a professor of international agriculture, the one and only ever to be named, have that title. And I think about the past and what it was like in the 60s when I first came here in 68. And I've been thinking about this since you asked for the interview. And things are quite different from when we first arrived. By the way, I should tell you, I had a long-term companion for 47 years. I met him in graduate school, and he stayed with me until his death a few years ago. So it means that I didn't do a lot of socializing, but I did some, and it was quite different. When I first arrived at the University of Illinois and Champaign, of course I knew no one, no gay people. I knew some people professionally, but we didn't know any gay people, and so it took us a while to get connected. But one of the major efforts that paid off was getting involved in Champaign House. Champaign House was just beginning to get on its feet. The remodeling had started, and so Al, my partner, and I went over and worked in Champaign House. We helped furnish part of the old building. It wasn't air conditioned. It was a pretty rundown. It was full of termites, and it was really something to experience. But we worked very hard and helped landscape the garden, and contributed not only material things, dishes and clothes and this sort of thing, but also our labor. And we assisted in one year on the July 4th float for GCAP. And that was quite an experience to go down the streets of the parade, and you would hear some boos and then you'd hear some yays. So it was a mixed reception, but they never threw anything at us, so we got through okay. Well, that was the beginning of meeting people. But during those 60s and the 70s, there was just a lot of national history developing, and it was having its effect here in Champaign-Urbana. And the things I remember is the social life was so different than it is these days. We had the gay people in town. Everybody knew everybody else. There was a huge group of lesbians that were here in town. We only knew them on the fringe. There were just a few lesbians that we knew. But there were a lot of gay men, with the university, of course. But a lot of professional people were here. And we met them through GCAP. But our social life was through various parties and get-togethers that the gay community would have. And there were straight people weren't invited because we weren't sure that they would accept us. And so we had dinner clubs where we'd rotate dinners with one group. A small clique or group would have dinner, each would take a turn. We would meet at the bar, and then the bar, although it was sort of a pickup, cruising bars, but oftentimes they were social centers for us to meet and just have a drink and converse with our other gay colleagues. I remember the one very notorious bar, which interesting enough I never got into, but it was the Inman Bar, the old Inman Hotel. And the Inman Hotel was a run-down, junky old place. Like the rooms would have a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling and just a bed. It was notorious, but it was wild. The bar downstairs was wild. And then another interesting place was in Lincoln Square. Lincoln Square had a notorious John in the Basement that, in fact, not that I was involved in any of these, but I just knew about it. And this is where a lot of gay men would meet, and sometimes there'd be so many people down in the basement they couldn't all get into the John. They had to wait their turn. So we had that sort of thing, and then we had picnics and things together during the summer, but just gay groups. In fact, I knew so many more gay people than straight people. It was just so different. And I avoided being very close to any of my colleagues at the university, because my partner and I would go to Chicago for a performance, a play, an opera, or whatever. On Monday morning, you'd come in and you would hesitate to tell them that you and your buddy had gone up to Chicago together to see a play. You just didn't mention it. I just never talked about my social life with any straight person. And this is the way it was. Now, of course, things have so changed that you feel very free to talk about your partner or friend that you do things together and tell you what you did. Another aspect were the churches. Now in the 60s, although there are some, the Unitarian Universal Church, we heard, but I never went over, were very accepting of gays. And that was the only church that we had never heard of. But eventually other churches in the community changed, and now all but a small handfuls of a few churches still preach against homosexuality. Otherwise, most of us are accepted in almost other churches. This is a huge change that I can see, is this aspect of it. And of course, the University of Illinois, I don't recall them having any set policy about gay people accepting or not accepting. They just never questioned it. But I did learn later in my career that I lost out on being a department head and another promotion because it was found out I was gay. And when I first came here, I played it real cool. I didn't talk much about who I was with anybody, but a very nasty friend wrote a letter to another professor in the department exposing me as to the fact I was gay. He went right to the department head and told him. And the department head got all flustered and said, "Oh, what am I going to do? He's a tenured professor." Well, the person who got the letter was very, very kind. And he just told the department head, just leave him alone and let's see what he does. Let him develop his career. And that was, as far as I know, the end of it. Eventually that department head became very supportive and completely accepting. But my partner was never invited to his home for any social function. So there's something. Now, things have changed. I think that most gay couples' invitations to parties and receptions include both, without. But I had the same experience with colleagues, professors, who would invite me to a party and not invite my partner, even though they knew he existed. So that phase of the social life has changed completely. And then I don't know too much about the present day social life because I'm not involved in it. But I have the impression now that the gay community is sort of amalgamated and enveloped or in the community as a whole. You find gay people, instead of having a gay ghetto in town, all living on one street or a certain area of town, which it was early, they're now all over. They're spread all over, and and the churches are much accepting. I find that the Cranert Center for the Performing Arts have gay couples who make major contributions, and the pictures of the gay couple appear in the program every time there's a performance, which was unheard of in the 60s. You just didn't do it. You're afraid of what. And then also, I think there's been a change of attitude in the police force. It used to be that there was a very negative attitude toward gay people. The cops didn't, as far as I knew, never made an effort to find out or get after us. But if there was an opportunity, if you were out of order, they didn't hesitate to take you in and make an issue of the fact that you were gay. And then we had a terrible misunderstanding with the press about 10 or 15 years ago, where they were confusing the child molesters, what's the word I want, pedophiles, with homosexuality. And early in those years, we got a very, very bad reputation. If you were homosexual, you were automatically a pedophile. And I had this experience. A straight man, when he found out I was gay, he said, "Are you a pedophile?" And I was just shocked, because this is just not what gay people are. We're a separate, complete different entity from that bunch of other people. So anyway, that's another big change I see, that the press, and another interesting, talk about the press, the News Gazette, and I can't remember the man's name, I shouldn't use names anyway, who was so anti-gay that he would not allow articles to be published in the News Gazette that had anything positive for the gay community. And he even refused to print an obituary in which the implication was that whoever had died had a partner. In fact, this happened to me. I submitted an obituary for my partner's death, and they censored it, took out the fact that I was his long-term partner, and so I had to put in a second obituary, which I had to pay for. You didn't used to pay for obituaries. And it was listed in the newspaper as an advertisement. This has now changed. Now everybody pays for the obituary, and there's no censor. But you mean, it's hard to believe that this took place, but it did. Well, that person has now died, left, or retired, I don't know, in the policy. Now the News Gazette has articles about gay life here and outside all the time in a very positive way, which I think is a great thing. Shut it off a minute.